Hello, YouTube. Um, 1 second, sorry. Today, I am finally going to be doing my review of The Invincible Iron Man. Now, this movie, I'm going to talk a little bit about the making of this movie, just because I think it's, I think it's a pretty interesting, story, like how they came up with this. This is obviously an old movie. It came out back in 2007, but but before I get into like the story and stuff of the movie, I just want to talk a little bit about um the making of the movie. So Frank, first of all, back this was back when Marvel Animation was doing animated movies, and um, they were teamed up with Lionsgate. They did the first two Ultimate Avengers movies, which if you haven't seen those yet, please check those out. I reviewed both of them, 1 and 2. So if you haven't seen those reviews, please check those out. But yeah, no, this movie. So Frank Parr came to them with a very very unique vision about what he wanted to do for this movie. Like, he already had rough designs, for like Iron Man, and he already had rough designs, for like Tony Stark and Iron Man, and like very he had like a very very clear vision about what he wanted to do um for this movie. And they were first off, this movie is based on no existing storyline from any of the comic books. No existing graphic novel, no existing comic art. The story, though it does have a lot of similarities to the origin story, from the comic books, it is not based on any existing storyline from any of the comics. It's completely original. But yeah, Frank had a very very clear vision about like what he wanted to do for this movie. Frank already had like rough sketches of he already had he already had concept art for like Tony Stark and Iron Man, and just a really really unique vision about what he wanted to do for this movie. And they teamed they worked with Avi Arad on this movie. And Iron Man is a character that Avi is very very passionate about. And the first draft of the movie, it was trying too hard to be a cartoon, according to them, and that's not what Avi wanted. That's not what anybody at Marvel Animation wanted either. So so Avi was like, well, let's just do the origin story. And that completely opened the floodgates for them. It was like, okay, we're gonna do the origin. So, and then everybody's excitement just like shot through the roof. Like, everybody was just and they something you have to keep in mind with this movie is, remember, the comic book was told like through panels. So there's a lot of like in between that you need to fill in. And um so they were able to they were able to fill in like those in between you know, like those in between spaces, but um, they were able to fill in, like those in between spaces. So they took, like certain liberties with the material and stuff like that. Very, very good liberties, I might add. Because usually, when when you take liberties with, with something so beloved, if you don't do it correctly, it can obviously, very, very easily turn into, a shit show. So, um, so um, the way that they did this movie, Craig Johnson, or I'm sorry, Greg Johnson, the screenwriter, wanted to tell Iron Man's origin from when he's part Howard Hughes James Bond to the part where he's desperately ill, and a complete change in his personality from looking inward to looking outward. So, um, so this movie opens with um, Rhodey, um, Rhodey, James Rhodes, working to raise the ancient. I'm sorry. First of all, the movie is set in ancient China, and um, Rhodey is trying to raise the ruins. Um, Rhodey has Tony Stark has spent all this money on a project, and that's trying to raise the ruins, the ancient ruins um, China. He's trying to raise um, he's trying to raise these ruins, and Tony has spent all this money, um, on this project. Rhodey, who has been with him, as Tony's, closest friend, and as someone who has been with him, since the beginning, he is helping him, with this project. Um, and the but of course, when you're doing something like this, there are obviously going to be, complications. One of them being a group of terrorists known as the Jade Dragons, and they have spent 3,000 years trying to prevent the raising of these ruins, because they are afraid that the Mandarin, who is now dust, who has been dust now for like thousands of years, they're afraid that if these ruins are lifted, the Mandarin will rise again. So this movie, in this movie, we meet Tony Stark like the first like few minutes into the movie, and he is it is pretty much how you would expect. He's very, very cocky. Everything is very much about him. He is he's Tony Stark. He's got money, he's got the women, he's got the fast cars, he's got it all. So now in the comic book, in the original Tales of the Suspense, in Tales of the Suspense 39, Iron Man's first appearance back when Stan Lee created him. He was Tony Stark was, he was a weapons designer, weapons inventor. He was demonstrating a new weapon in Vietnam, trying to get the money, the funds for his new invention. and he steps on a mine, and he steps on a mine, and a piece of shrapnel is lodged in his chest, and he he gets taken prisoner by Wong Chu and these terrorists, and they say, and Wong Chu tells him, I want you to make me, this weapon, and if you do, obviously, and if you do, I will set you free, which is obviously a load of crap, obviously. And it's from there that Tony and a scientist called Professor Yinsen, they get the idea to build this chest plate to keep, to help keep him alive. And from there, Tony gets the idea to build the first suit of armor, which would be the very first Iron Man armor. In the movie, in this movie, Rhodey is taken prisoner by the Jade Dragons, and he is taken basically as leverage to get Tony Stark. And so Tony learns that Rhodey is missing, and he learns that Rhodey is missing, and he learns that all the workers, all the people, that were working, on this project for him, raising the ruins. Excuse me. He learns that Rhodey is missing and the workers are all dead. So he gets, so he finally, so after making, all these, after making all these, BS promises to Rhodey about, how, I'll make it out there, I'll clear my schedule, yada, yada, yada. So the last straw is finally when his best friend is taken prisoner, and the work and all the people that were working with, all the construction workers that he had working for him, when they all get killed, Tony is like, okay, I need to get out there. So he has a military escort. Take him out to, to where the, to where the incident happened, and they are attacked. They are attacked, and Tony Tony's still inside, still inside the truck. A missile comes in. A missile comes in and hits, and hits the truck, and he suffers heart damage, and he suffers heart damage. So both Tony and Rhodey end up being prisoners of the Jade Dragons, and it's from there that we see a complete change in Tony's personality. Like in the beginning, like the first few minutes of the few minutes of the movie, that we meet him, he's cocky, he's like for example in the before the incident happened, he's we find out that he's late for a meeting with his company, and he comes in, and he comes in like 40 minutes late, doesn't have a care in the world. And his father Howard is the head of the company. his father Howard is the head of the company, and the board is like, and the board is all pissed off at him because he's been spending all this money. Um, he's been spending all this money without board approval. Um, without board approval. So they're basically like, um, you know, so um, so they basically they basically say, hey, they're basically like, hey, listen, you're not being responsible. You're spending money without telling us, blah blah blah. We're gonna you know we're gonna take everything that you've been working on, put it into your father's vault, and and shut down everything that you've been working on. So um and he just at the beginning of the movie, he just he doesn't have a care in the world. But after his accident, we start to see him, we start to and I don't want to give and I'm not and I don't want to give you guys the impression, because Tony Stark, like, even when the movie opens, this is somebody who is who is nowhere this is someone who is by no means a bad person, but there is no doubt that he could be a hell of a lot better. um so he is so when he has his accident, we see a complete change in his personality, and we see him um and we we see him start to um and we see him and we see like his journey onto becoming this hero that that he that he obviously eventually turns into. um Now, now eventually, because of because Tony lifted the ruins, the ancient ruins, the the pro the prophecy the the prophecy of um the prophecy of, once the ruins are lifted, the demon elementals will be awakened. The the demon elementals will be awakened, and they will start looking for the Mandarin's rings, and resurrect their master. All of that starts coming true. And all of that starts coming true. Um the Mandarin, who has been dust for years and years, um because Tony lifted these ancient ruins, that prophecy is starting to come true. And um Tony eventually eventually sees, at first he doesn't see, at first he doesn't, like, he has no clue, like, he at first he has no clue of the repercussions that he is going that are going to come his way once he does this. However, later on in the movie, we see that once he starts hunting down the rings, and trying to stop the demon elementals, he starts to see um just how much damage his actions have done, um by raising these ruins. And um so Tony and Rhodey are taken prisoner by the Jade Dragons. And Wong Chu is in the movie. Wong Chu is in the movie. Obviously he doesn't he doesn't look he doesn't look how he did, obviously, in the comic book, but it is very much the same character. Um, they say to he says to Tony. He's like, you're going to build me you're going to build me something that will allow you to reverse the process of what you've done. Um, you're going to build something that is going to reverse, what you've done, to the ancient city. Um, and it's from there, and it's from there at that point that Tony gets the idea to build, the first suit of Iron Man armor. And um, one of the things that Avi Arad is so passionate about is the Hall of Armors, and he very much wanted, that part of Iron Man to be in this movie. And you're probably asking, well, how the hell was he able to build, an entire suit of armor in like, in like an 80-minute animated movie? Well, there's an answer to that. The answer is he's been doing it for years and years he's been doing it, for decades during his time at Stark International. So when we see him, when we see him don, when we see him go into, like his room later on in the movie with Rhodey, when you see him at Stark International and he goes into like the secret entrance with Rhodey and shows and reveals to him, like what he's been doing all this time, you literally see, like the entire, like Hall of Armor in the, in this, in this shot. And it's a really, really sick shot. Like and Tony in this movie, his relationship with Rhodey is, Rhodey is obviously, his best friend, but, however, he is eventually, Tony, one thing you have to understand about Tony Stark is that, obviously, he's not perfect. So, he occasionally he will, step on toes, sometimes, without meaning to, or, without even realizing, without even realizing it. Like he has an argument with Rhodey, in the movie. He has an argument with Rhodey at some point during the movie, and Tony goes, "Look, Rhodey, you're making this personal. We're friends." And Rhodey is all pissed off because he feels that Tony feels like that their friendship, wasn't important enough for Tony, to be able to come to him and say, "Hey, this is this is something that I've been working on." And so there's very much that rough patch later on between them. But this is a movie about East meets West. It's about like magic versus technology. When the guys at Marvel Animation did this movie, they wanted to, they didn't want to do the classic origin from the comic books. They wanted to do something a little bit more modern. They wanted to tell a story in a setting that would be that would resemble the time period of Iron Man's technology, and ancient China seemed like a perfect seemed like a perfect setting for it. Um, the main villain in the movie is the Mandarin. He's obviously the best villain that Iron Man has. He's the only good villain Iron Man has. Um, However, he looks much different in this movie than in you know than in the comic books. Like if you're familiar with um, like if you follow Iron Man, you know that he's got the 10 rings with like the mask and like the long the long robes. They didn't want to do that. They didn't want to do that in this movie. Um, but yeah, no, this movie is really about like one man's journey to becoming, the ironclad hero that that we know, Tony Stark to be. And it is very much it is very much, his journey, his story. Um and basically, what he has to overcome. Um and like what he has to overcome physically and emotionally. Um because at the beginning he starts out like very very cocky and just he's like he's kind of a schmuck in the in the beginning. And then after, as I said before, after his accident, we start to see a change in his personality. And but yeah, no, this movie is fantastic. I um The animation is so beautiful and so gorgeous to look at, and the way that they were able to use CGI and make it look natural. um it is just, I mean, it's mind-blowing. um it's mind-blowing the way that they were able to do that. um the suit of armors particularly the Tales of the Suspense number 39 armor, it looks great. um it doesn't look too different from from the comic book design. It doesn't look too different from the comic book design, but it very very much does resemble um you know the the comic book. And just like the overall like look of and just like the overall look of the suit. And and just the overall look of like the suit. And um like how it was drawn in the comic book versus the movie. It looks fantastic. I mean, all of the um um all of the armors in here, um in this movie. If you're an Iron Man fan, there's a lot to love about this movie. um like I said, the movie does take some liberties, but there is enough um recognizable elements from the comic book to be able um for fans to be able to go, yes, this makes sense. This is this is still very much in line with the comic book and the character. And even though, like I said before, the movie's based on no existing graphic novel, no existing storyline from the comic books, no existing comic art. It is still very much it is still very much um, the there's a lot about this movie that still very, very much speaks to the character and, you know, the world that he lives in. And yeah, no, this movie is so good and so fantastic. Um, it is, you know, it is it's phenomenal. So if you guys haven't seen this, I would definitely check it out. Because it is very, 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 very much worth seeing. So anyway, let me know whether you've seen it, what you thought of it. Like, subscribe, and I will talk to you guys later. Peace.